I'd rather die than withdraw. If they're gonna kill me, they're gonna kill me.
So you'd still like to serve on the Supreme Court?
I'd rather die than withdraw from the process. Not for the purpose of serving on the Supreme Court, but for the purpose of not being driven out of this process. I would not be scared. I don't like bullies. I've never run from bullies. I never cry uncle, and I'm not going to cry uncle today, whether I want to be on the Supreme Court or not.
So I thought I would just share a little bit about how the threats have affected me and my family personally. They have required me to, my children, to think about and see things that children should not have to see. Or
we got to talk about Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Oh man, shout out to Clarence Thomas, because man, what a classic, absolute classic clip of him saying, "I would rather die than withdraw from this process." Not because I want to be on the Supreme Court, but I'm not going to let anybody bully me. I'm not going to let anybody push me off of this process. So I would rather die than withdraw. So if they're going to kill me, then let them kill me. But I ain't going anywhere. Love that. Love that. And it's proven why, he's the probably arguably the greatest Supreme Court justice of all time. So big shout out to Clarence Thomas, man. Big shout out. I wish we could have the entire Supreme Court filled with nothing but Clarence Thomas. Wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be absolutely amazing? Now, before we get into what Amy Coney Barrett had to say, because of course she went before Congress and had some things to say, because the Supreme Court wants more funding for security purposes as well as just other things as well, because, costs have risen, okay? Joe Biden's inflation, 9%, made costs go up a little bit. So they're asking for some more money for many things, including security. But like I said, before we get into that, I want to play a couple of clips because the security is an issue.
2022, near Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home, police arrested someone with weapons who was later charged with attempted assassination. Protesters gathered outside Justice Clarence Thomas's home in Virginia after the Dobbs decision, which ended the federal constitutional right to abortion. And protesters gathered outside the home of Justice Amy Coney Barrett following the leak of the draft Dobbs opinion. And overall, the Supreme Court is requesting a budget of $228 million.
We're going to pause that. We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that. But I wanted to play a little bit of that, as well as there was a guy who pulled up to the Capitol and actually asked Capitol Police, where's the Supreme Court? He was later arrested because he had a firearm in his car, and he planned on going to the Supreme Court, and who knows what he planned on doing from there. We can make some assumptions based on, what he had with him, but yeah, it is very, very serious, especially when you have politicians like Chuck Schumer saying the most ridiculous things. And here's the thing. If Trump had said the exact stuff that you're about to witness Chuck Schumer say, I guarantee you Democrats would be calling for his arrest, would be marching up and down the streets. Trump is, promoting violence and all of this other nonsense. But because Chuck Schumer is the Democrat, nobody has anything to say about it. Check it out.
Inside the walls of this court, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments, as you know, for the first major abortion right cases since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench. We know what's at stake. Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women. And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. The bottom line is very simple. We will stand with the American people. We will stand with American women. We will tell President Trump and Senate Republicans who have stacked the court with right-wing ideologues that you're going to be gone in November and you will never be able to do what you're trying to do now, ever again. You hear that over there on the far right? You're gone in November.
Now, let's be honest. If Trump got up on walked up to a podium and said some of those same exact words, do we not think the left will be going crazy calling for his arrest, saying he's inciting violence? What if he said what Maxine Waters said some years ago when she said, when you see them out in public, you push up on them and you let them know that they are not welcome here anymore. What if he said those exact same words? Do you think they would be calling for his arrest, saying he's promoting violence, pushing violence, and all this other nonsense? Of course they would. But it's fine when they do it. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. I know you guys have been waiting on it. Here is what Amy Coney Barrett had to say. Check it out.
So I thought I would just share a little bit about how the threats have affected me and my family personally. They have required me to, my children, to think about and see things that children should not have to see or think about. One example is when threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago around the time of the Dobbs leak. My security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was and why I had it, and I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one. It's also been reported in the news that roughly 6 weeks ago, I was the victim of a swatting incident. At that point, my teenage son, one of my teenage sons, opened the door to go out with friends and saw in our street, it was full of police cars, who had responded to a false report of gunshots and raised voices in my home. I was very, very grateful that I had Supreme Court police outside my home because they were able to stop and meet with and explain to the county police that it had been a false alarm, and so the police did not actually attempt to enter our home. Many of us, me included, have received threatening anonymous deliveries designed to intimidate and harass us. They are often sent in the name of Judge Salas's son, who I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, Mr. Chairman, is deceased because he was killed by a disgruntled lawyer who showed up at Judge Salas's home intending to kill her, but her son, 20 years old at the time, opened the door and took the bullet instead. Her husband, standing behind, was seriously injured. So I think the message on these deliveries being sent in his name is clear. As Justice Kagan said, federal judges across the country, throughout the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, continue to do their jobs without fear or favor, but the threat level is really high.
So, there's a couple of things here. First off, if your son doesn't know what a bulletproof vest is, I feel like that's a problem. Because if I heard her correctly, her son is 12.
So I thought I would just share. They have required me to, my children, to think about and see things that children should not do, is when threats to my life were particularly.
Hold on, I want to play it. I want to play it back a little bit.
My security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son.
Yeah, 12. If your son is 12 and he doesn't know what a bulletproof vest is, that's a problem. You are shielding him way too hard from the world. At 12 years old, he's never played Call of Duty. He's never I don't know, played Grand Theft Auto. That's a little extreme. I know some parents don't like that kind of stuff, but still, it's a video game at the end of the day. Just a video game. Same thing with Call of Duty. Or watched any action movies. I would even say even Fortnite, right? I know the mechanic isn't necessarily a vest, but it's a shield, right? I haven't played Fortnite forever. Jeez. The gulps or whatever that they do on there, the shields. Same kind of situation. If he doesn't know what a bulletproof vest is, I find that a little strange. A little strange. Now, I will say this. The fact that a Supreme Court justice needs to have a bulletproof vest is also crazy too. Okay? I want to make that clear. I'm not excusing these far leftist behavior in threatening the Supreme Court justices, whether on the right or on the left, right? Both sides. Supreme Court justices. Even the Supreme Court, like I said, even the Supreme Court justices that are super liberal and never vote with the right side, hey, they deserve to live peacefully too. 100%. Okay? Because that is just absolutely ridiculous to be threatening Supreme Court justices. And honestly, if I was up there, questioning Amy, first off, I would have a couple of things to say. I mean, obviously, I would give them the money that they need for protection. But then I would also ask Amy, Amy, have the threats changed the way that you vote? Because, I took the liberty to look at some numbers, and it looks like since the threats ramped up, you've started to vote further to the left. So if that is the case, and these threats are coming from these leftists, we all know it's not coming from folks on the right, shouldn't they be on your side? And if not, then why are you voting with them? Because I want to throw this up on the screen. So here you have Amy Coney Barrett's conservative voting record before and after Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health in 2022. So over here on the left, you can see where she was voting at a higher clip, 65% in the 2020 session, 81% with Republicans in the 2021 session. Dobbs' decision hit, threats came through the roof, immediately tanks down to 60, or 59, excuse me. Then it went to 57. Now we're all the way down at 50 and dropping. Okay, so what's going on here, Amy? Shouldn't these folks be on your side? And if not, then why do you continually and increasingly vote in their direction? What's going on here? I want to read this. Amy Coney Barrett's record tells a troubling story. Before Dobbs, she voted with conservative position in 81% of non-unanimous cases. Since then, that number has dropped sharply into the 50s and 60s range in subsequent terms, including on major cases involving birthright citizenship, election procedures, and administrative power, where she has sided with Chief Justice Roberts and the liberals. The Dobbs leak triggered violent threats and protests aimed directly at Supreme Court justices. If the threat of violence or intimidation can move a justice's votes on foundational issues, we have a constitutional crisis on our hands. Judicial independence is not optional. It is the foundation of the rule of law. When justices appear to bend under pressure, public trust collapses, and the entire system is at risk. This cannot be allowed to stand. Threats against the court must be met with zero tolerance, full investigations, and real consequences, no matter who makes them. Anything less is an attack on self-government itself. I agree. We see the consequences of that. And it's also why I played that clip at the beginning of this video with Clarence Thomas saying, they'll just have to kill me. I'm not going anywhere. We need people like that on the Supreme Court. Because and I get it, right? It's scary, especially if you've got a family and whatnot. But if that is making you do this, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable. On both sides, right? Follow the Constitution as a Supreme Court justice. But then also, from these far leftists, it is unacceptable as well. I think you shouldn't even be able to protest in front of a Supreme Court justice's home. You shouldn't even be able to march the streets in front of their homes. Leave them alone. That should be made illegal, in my humble opinion. I know some people could say that's a slippery slope, Rich, freedom of speech and whatnot. But also, you can't be allowed to intimidate the judges, because you see what happens. Look at Coney Barrett. She started off hot. Then the big decision hit. And then all the threats came. The swatting incident, right? The random mail, the threats, the bulletproof vest. And now everything's tanking. She's basically a liberal now. And that is a problem. Like I said, on both sides. It's a problem for her because she's not following the Constitution completely. But then also, it's a major problem for these far leftists. They must be arrested and prosecuted. I guarantee you, if you made it illegal to, one, threaten a Supreme Court justice, if you made it illegal to protest in front of a Supreme Court justice home, and you took these threats serious, and you started giving people hefty sentences for this type of stuff, I mean years, 20 years in prison for this type of stuff, it all ends tomorrow. It all ends tomorrow. Instantly, boom, done, vanished. And that, once again, that is for both sides. I know us folks on the right don't do this type of stuff, but even the liberal justice that I would never agree with, they deserve protection too. Even though, right, it's their own side that's actually doing it, they deserve protection too. But y'all get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts and your opinions. How can we ensure that our Supreme Court justices aren't influenced by any of this stuff? Some people have said that Coney Barrett just needs to step away. She needs to retire. I highly doubt that's going to happen. Coney Barrett is what? I believe she's in her 50s. She ain't retiring. Not retiring. Not by a long shot. It would be nice because then we could make sure that we replaced her with, more of a Clarence Thomas type, But, nah, she ain't going anywhere. But what do you guys think the fix is for this? Let me know. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and I'm going to catch y'all on the next one. Peace.